On September 14, 2013, a man was found dead under mysterious circumstances in a luxury cruise ship hotel suite docked between England and Germany. That man was Rashid Khalid, a Hamas missile engineer whose death would unravel a story of espionage, betrayal, and clandestine warfare that stretched across borders and defied official explanations. Within hours, whispers began circulating in intelligence circles. Was this a medical emergency? Or had the long hand of Mossad finally reached him in the most unlikely of sanctuaries? The ship's corridors, bathed in sterile light and humming with the sound of engines, became the backdrop for one of the most intricate manhunts of the 21st century. Passengers aboard remembered the unease that settled as crew members quietly restricted access to one floor of the vessel. A sealed room, guarded not by uniformed officers but by men in plain clothes, quickly became the center of attention. Cameras flickered, shutters clicked, and rumors spread like wildfire among travelers who had expected nothing more than an elegant European cruise. Yet inside that room lay a man whose technical genius had altered the balance of power in Gaza, whose innovations had lengthened the range of Hamas rockets, and whose name had appeared on the most confidential lists of Israeli operatives. Rashid Khalid was no ordinary victim. He was both an asset and a threat, a figure revered by some and reviled by others. His end, shrouded in secrecy, marked the culmination of years of pursuit and the opening chapter of a mystery that still echoes through the corridors of global intelligence. The discovery of his body presented a carefully arranged tableau. He appeared to be resting, his posture deceptively serene, as though sleep had simply claimed him. But subtle signs betrayed the illusion. A misplaced pillow, a dislodged glass, and the faint trace of struggle on the sheets hinted at an intrusion that left no fingerprints and no witnesses. Ship officials scrambled to contain panic, their statements bland, their faces pale. The body was removed swiftly, yet questions lingered among the crew. Why were men with diplomatic immunity already present on board, and how did they arrive so quickly? Rashid Khalid's death was not merely an isolated event. It was a message, a strike executed with clinical precision, and its discovery revealed the presence of forces far greater than those seen by ordinary passengers enjoying a voyage across calm waters. Shadows lengthened as word of the incident reached ports and capitals. Intelligence agencies quietly logged the name, while journalists scrambled to piece together fragments of rumor and fact. The shock reverberated not only in Gaza, but across Europe, where the idea of Mossad operatives infiltrating a civilian cruise challenged assumptions about safety and sovereignty. Each headline became more sensational. But beneath the noise lay a cold reality. Rashid Khalid had been eliminated, not in a battlefield or in the streets of Gaza, but in the sterile anonymity of a floating hotel room. The discovery was not simply a body, it was the unveiling of a new chapter in the shadow war between Israel and Hamas, one fought in places where no one expected to find death lurking. The death of Rashid Khalid was not just another headline about violence in the Middle East. It was a strike at the very heart of a technological arms race that had transformed Gaza's capabilities against Israel. Khalid's expertise in metallurgy, propulsion systems, and guidance technology had given Hamas the ability to extend its rockets deeper into Israeli territory, threatening major cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Every kilometer of added range translated into new vulnerabilities, new fears, and new calculations for Israeli defense planners. His death therefore carried implications that reached far beyond the confines of a cruise ship cabin. It raised the stakes for Hamas, for Israel, and for every government monitoring the fragile balance of the region. Within hours, Hamas officials began issuing statements from Gaza, accusing Israel of orchestrating the killing. In Tel Aviv, silence reigned, neither confirmation nor denial, only the familiar refusal to comment on operational matters. But diplomats across Europe whispered among themselves, alarmed by the audacity of the operation. If Mossad could orchestrate such an act aboard a civilian vessel moving between two NATO states, what did it say about the reach of Israel's clandestine apparatus? For every intelligence officer observing the incident, the killing of Rashid Khalid symbolized a dangerous escalation. It showed that there was no sanctuary, no safe harbor, no neutral ground in the war between Hamas and Israel. The stakes were nothing less than the credibility of international boundaries, the sanctity of civilian spaces, and the shadowy question of how far one nation was willing to go in order to neutralize a single man. Who had truly orchestrated the death of Rashid Khalid aboard that cruise ship hotel room? Was it indeed Mossad, operating with surgical precision, or could rival Palestinian factions have engineered his end to silence competition and consolidate influence? Why would such an operation unfold in the seemingly neutral waters between England and Germany, where the fallout would almost certainly ignite international scrutiny? And what role, if any, did European intelligence services play? Were they complicit or simply outmaneuvered? Why was Rashid Khalid hunted at this particular moment, when his innovations in missile engineering had only just begun reshaping the balance of power? Was the timing meant to cripple Hamas's momentum, or to send a chilling warning to others who dared to wield technology against Israel? Could his death be traced to intercepted communications, an informant's betrayal, or a surveillance net so wide that even the sanctity of a civilian voyage offered no shield? The questions multiplied, leaving investigators, journalists, and governments scrambling for answers. In espionage, truth is rarely pure. The real question was whether the world would ever learn who signed the order, who executed the mission, and why Rashid Khalid's final breath had to be taken in the silence of a locked cabin. Rashid Khalid was born in 1972 in the crowded alleys of Khan Yunis refugee camp in the southern Gaza Strip. His childhood unfolded against a backdrop of poverty, military checkpoints, and the constant hum of tension that permeated every household. His father, a schoolteacher dismissed after refusing to collaborate with Israeli authorities, imbued him with a sense of defiance that became central to his identity. His mother, who sold bread to supplement the family's meager income, taught him resilience, ensuring he remained in school despite the odds. Rashid's earliest memories were not of toys or games, but of curfews, raids, and the piercing sound of jets overhead. It was in this environment that he first began tinkering with discarded metal scraps, wiring, and broken radios, seeking both distraction and understanding. From an early age, it became clear that Rashid possessed an uncommon intellect. Teachers recalled a boy who could repair a classroom generator at age 10, who sketched crude rocket shapes in the margins of his notebooks when others doodled football fields. He excelled in mathematics and physics, subjects that required precision and imagination, and he devoured books smuggled from Egypt on engineering and science. Yet his brilliance was inseparable from his surroundings. He studied by candlelight during power outages, and he experimented with chemistry sets pieced together from household materials. The contradictions of his life, intellectual hunger amidst deprivation, creativity under siege, formed the core of his character. His adolescence was marked not only by scholastic promise, but also by the creeping awareness that his talents would one day be weaponized by circumstance. Opportunities for escape were scarce, but Rashid earned a scholarship to study mechanical engineering at Birzeit University in the West Bank. Leaving Gaza for the first time, he encountered a broader world of ideas, technology, and politics. He learned about ballistic trajectories and propulsion theories in dusty lecture halls, but outside the classroom he saw demonstrations, clashes with Israeli forces, and students passionately debating the future of Palestine. In these years, his identity as a scientist merged with his identity as a Palestinian under occupation. His notebooks now contained not just equations, but also sketches of crude rocket stages and launch mechanisms. Every page reflected the duality of his existence, a man of science navigating the politics of resistance. Yet Rashid was not entirely consumed by struggle. Friends remembered his quiet humor, his habit of sketching mechanical designs on napkins during meals, and his deep love for the sea. He would spend hours walking the beaches of Gaza during summer visits home, collecting shells and listening to the waves, imagining systems of propulsion modeled on nature's design. The paradox of his upbringing was clear. A man shaped by hardship, nourished by knowledge, and driven by the unshakable conviction that his intellect could alter the destiny of his people. The early years of Rashid Khalid laid the foundation for a path that would later make him both indispensable and hunted, a figure caught between genius and war. Rashid Khalid's ideology was forged in the crucible of occupation and sharpened by years of intellectual rigor. He believed that resistance was not only a right, but a scientific endeavor, a field in which calculations, metallurgy, and engineering were as critical as slogans and speeches. Unlike many militants, he rarely raised his voice in anger or rallied crowds with fiery words. Instead, he articulated a quiet philosophy that innovation in weaponry could shift the balance of fear, forcing Israel to reconsider the costs of its presence in Gaza. He often told close associates that steel speaks louder than speeches, a mantra that captured his belief in the practical over the symbolic. His faith in Islam was strong, yet it blended seamlessly with his fascination for physics, creating a worldview where divine will and mechanical precision intertwined. Beyond ideology, Rashid's personal quirks revealed a man of habits and rituals. He drank bitter Arabic coffee at dawn, always in the same chipped cup inherited from his mother. He wrote notes in fine pencil, never in pen, believing graphite allowed for constant revision and improvement. His workspace was meticulously ordered, with screws and wires arranged in labeled tins, each one aligned by size. He disliked clutter and detested inefficiency, often scolding junior engineers for wasting material. Yet beneath this discipline lay a softer side. He adored classical Arabic poetry, especially verses of Mahmoud Darwish, which he recited quietly while soldering circuits late into the night. For Rashid, poetry and engineering were not opposites. They were complementary, both offering clarity in a chaotic world. Friends described him as reserved, even introverted, but not unfriendly. He enjoyed long chess matches, often sacrificing pieces early to engineer surprising checkmates, mirroring his tactical thinking in real life. He was meticulous about his appearance, preferring neatly pressed shirts and polished shoes, even when working in makeshift workshops. Though surrounded by conflict, he never smoked and rarely raised his hand in violence. His weapons were his mind, his routines, and his relentless pursuit of precision. Ideology drove him forward, but it was these quirks, his rituals, his intellect, his quiet obsessions, that gave him the aura of a man set apart, both admired and feared. Among comrades and adversaries alike, Rashid Khalid acquired nicknames that reflected both admiration and dread. Within Hamas's inner circle, he was known as the Architect, a title earned through his ability to design and refine missile systems with scarce resources under relentless pressure. Among the younger militants, he was whispered about as Ustad al-Sawarik, the teacher of rockets, because he not only built weapons, but taught others to replicate his methods, spreading knowledge like fire across Gaza's underground workshops. To Israeli intelligence, however, his codename was colder, clinical. Blacksmith, a reference to his talent for turning raw metal into lethal instruments. Each name carried with it a narrative, a lens through which his role in the conflict was defined. Rashid himself resisted grand titles, yet his self-image was no less commanding. He saw himself not as a warrior, but as an engineer of survival. In his journals, he described rockets as lines of dignity drawn into the sky, symbols that Palestinians could not be erased or silenced. He rarely posed for photographs and avoided public speeches, preferring to remain in the shadows. His sense of identity rested not in celebrity, but in utility. For Rashid Khalid, legacy meant function. Every missile launched was a statement louder than any proclamation. The path from student to militant engineer was neither abrupt nor accidental for Rashid Khalid. During his years at Birzeit University, the political climate was electric, with the First Intifada still echoing in memory and the Oslo Accords producing more frustration than hope. Rashid initially immersed himself in academics, but as he witnessed friends arrested, beaten, and expelled, his scientific skills began drawing the attention of underground networks. His ability to repair electronics, fabricate makeshift circuits, and design simple propulsion models made him a quiet but invaluable asset. At first, his role was limited to advising activists on non-lethal devices, such as communication systems and signaling flares. Yet gradually, the line blurred, and his equations began aligning with blueprints of weapons. After graduation, Rashid returned to Gaza, where Hamas recruiters recognized his potential. They approached him not with fiery sermons, but with technical requests. How could steel pipes be reinforced? How could crude propellants be stabilized? How could guidance improve beyond unguided trajectories? Each problem appealed to his engineering mind, and each solution bound him tighter to the movement. He did not carry rifles into battle or plant roadside bombs. Instead, he spent long nights in clandestine workshops, guiding apprentices, revising formulas, and pushing crude technology toward sophistication. His scientific contributions quickly elevated him beyond the rank of technician. He became a strategist of warfare by invention. Rashid's transition into militancy was cemented when one of his early prototypes, a short-range Qassam rocket, successfully struck Israeli farmland. Though militarily insignificant, the symbolic power of the launch reverberated across Gaza, and his reputation solidified. He now occupied a space both feared and revered, the academic who had weaponized his mind for the cause. His path into politics was indirect, for Rashid never sought office, but his name became entangled with Hamas's military wing. In Gaza's narrative of struggle, he was no longer simply an engineer. He was the silent backbone of resistance. The man who once walked beaches collecting shells had now charted a course where every calculation, every design, and every launch drew him deeper into a clandestine world from which there was no return. Rashid Khalid's rise as a technical mind within Hamas inevitably drew the attention of Israeli and Palestinian Authority security forces. His early clashes with the law were less about dramatic arrests than about a slow tightening of surveillance. In 1997, Israeli intelligence linked him to a covert workshop in Rafah, where rudimentary rockets were being tested in abandoned fields at night. Though the raid uncovered little more than fragments and tools, Rashid's name entered classified files. 2 years later, in 1999, Palestinian Authority police detained him briefly under Israeli pressure, accusing him of unauthorized weapons experimentation. He was held for 3 months in Jericho prison, where he remained silent, giving investigators nothing beyond denials. His release was secured through political bargaining, but his reputation as a clandestine engineer only deepened. By the early 2000s, Rashid was accused of overseeing smuggling routes from Egypt into Gaza, acquiring pipes, chemicals, and electronic components. In 2002, Israeli forces raided a safe house in Gaza City, seizing documents believed to be his notes. The cache included diagrams of rocket stages, fuel ratios, and crude guidance systems scribbled in pencil. Though Rashid evaded capture, the discovery confirmed suspicions. He was no longer a background figure, but a central architect in Hamas's military ambitions. Arrest warrants were issued in absentia, branding him as a fugitive perpetually hunted. Despite his growing notoriety, Rashid adapted by moving constantly, rarely sleeping in the same house twice. He relied on a network of loyalists who shielded him from surveillance, providing temporary shelters and disguises. Arrest attempts multiplied, but his discipline and caution ensured escape. Each failed attempt only magnified his legend among militants, who saw him as untouchable. Yet for Mossad and Shin Bet, his survival represented a growing threat. The man who once faced petty accusations of illegal experiments had now become a high-value target, whose continued freedom meant longer-range rockets raining down on Israel. In militant circles, Rashid Khalid often spoke of his brief detentions as formative experiences, painting them as proof of his endurance under pressure. He claimed that during his 3 months in Jericho prison, interrogators employed psychological tactics, sleep deprivation, blinding lights, and endless questioning designed to fracture resolve. Although he never admitted to physical torture, associates reported that he hinted at methods intended to break his concentration: loud mechanical noises, sudden isolation, and threats against family members. For a man whose identity rested on precision and control, such techniques were perhaps more tormenting than physical blows. These ordeals, real or embellished, became part of his mythology. Among young recruits, stories spread that he had resisted every attempt to coerce information, leaving interrogators frustrated and empty-handed. Rashid himself allowed such tales to circulate unchecked, knowing that legend could inspire as much as fact. Whether he exaggerated or not, the narrative served its purpose. It portrayed him as unyielding, immune to compromise, and utterly loyal to the cause. In truth, the experience may have deepened his resolve. He emerged from detention more guarded, more cautious, and more convinced that his intellect must serve as both shield and sword against forces determined to silence him. By the early 2000s, Rashid Khalid's technical abilities had elevated him from a gifted engineer on the margins to a central figure in Gaza's militant apparatus. Though Hamas remained his primary affiliation, whispers circulated that he had briefly advised smaller Islamist cells before fully embedding within the organization's military wing, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades. His role was not public, nor ceremonial. He joined not through speeches or pledges, but through utility, providing what few others could: the technical expertise to transform limited resources into operational weapons. His workshop became a classroom, his notebooks a manual for warfare, and his presence a bridge between raw ambition and practical capability. In 2003, intelligence reports indicated that Khalid was instrumental in merging disparate efforts across Gaza into a more centralized missile development program. He fostered cooperation between black market smugglers, chemical handlers, and amateur machinists, weaving them into a network that operated under Hamas's protection. While commanders plotted strategy, Rashid focused on mechanics, fuel stability, nozzle durability, trajectory correction. He saw himself as part of a larger machine, a cog whose precision was vital for the entire structure to function. His contributions transformed Hamas's arsenal from crude, unpredictable rockets into weapons that could reach deeper into Israeli territory, altering calculations for both sides. Khalid never formally founded a separate faction, but in many ways he functioned as a founding father of Hamas's missile corps. By 2005, his designs had become standardized blueprints passed down to apprentices who could replicate them in hidden workshops across Gaza. His legacy was institutionalized within the group, making him irreplaceable and simultaneously making him a prime target for Israel. Joining Hamas had not been an ideological leap, it was for Rashid the inevitable conclusion of his technical journey. The scientist had become inseparable from the militant cause, his identity welded to the very rockets he created. By the mid-2000s, Rashid Khalid's role had expanded beyond workshops and laboratories. He became a key figure in the logistical pipelines that kept Hamas's arsenal alive. Through the tunnels snaking beneath the Gaza-Egypt border, he oversaw the smuggling of pipes, fertilizers, chemicals, and electronic parts disguised as household goods. He was not personally present at the crossings, but his fingerprints were everywhere. Specifications for the alloys, instructions for safe transport, and coded signals that moved cargo under the radar of Egyptian and Israeli patrols. These smuggling operations allowed him to experiment with longer ranges and sturdier designs, pushing the Qassam rockets into new and threatening dimensions. Khalid's reach also extended into operations that combined technical knowledge with militant daring. Intelligence reports linked him indirectly to kidnappings of contractors and alleged informants in Gaza, individuals whose knowledge of tunnel routes or material shipments posed security risks. Though he did not wield the gun himself, his equations and instructions guided the missions, ensuring that kidnappings created leverage, and that every exchange brought in new materials or freed imprisoned comrades. Each act of violence fed into the cycle of procurement, giving Rashid the tools he needed for further experiments. By 2008, his name was connected with a series of rocket launches that struck Ashkelon and Sderot, creating panic among Israeli civilians. For every missile that landed, Israeli intelligence pointed back to Khalid's workshops as the source. His work transformed Gaza's military capability from symbolic defiance into tangible menace. With kidnapping securing bargaining chips, smuggling supplying raw material, and his innovations converting scraps into precision instruments, Khalid had escalated far beyond the role of a clandestine scientist. He was now a battlefield commander without uniform, his violence expressed not through bullets, but through the cold geometry of missile trajectories. The chronology of Rashid Khalid's operations reads like a technical dossier interwoven with blood and secrecy. In March 2004, his first documented breakthrough came when a Qassam rocket, fueled with a stabilized nitrate mixture, reached Sderot. The strike killed 2 civilians, shocking Israel with the realization that Gaza's militants could now extend their reach. Surveillance later confirmed Khalid had supervised the design, though not the launch, of the weapon. By December 2006, his second major leap arrived, a batch of rockets modified with reinforced steel casings, smuggled through Rafah tunnels. On January 3, 2007, 3 of these rockets hit Ashkelon's industrial zone, damaging infrastructure and pushing Israeli intelligence to elevate him to a priority threat. On July 9, 2008, A network Khalid oversaw launched a volley of 5 rockets in a coordinated strike, each equipped with improved stabilizing fins to extend range and accuracy. The attack coincided with Hamas's kidnapping of an Israeli contractor, a dual demonstration of Khalid's ability to synchronize engineering with psychological warfare. Then came Operation Cast Lead in late 2008 and early 2009. Despite heavy bombardments, his teams managed to fire dozens of rockets, some reaching farther than ever before. For Israel, every impact became a symbol of one man's unseen hand. By November 2012, during Operation Pillar of Defense, Khalid's innovations culminated in the firing of Fajr 5-style rockets, longer-range systems influenced by Iranian designs, but refined through his adaptations. Tel Aviv came under fire, an unprecedented escalation that sent civilians scrambling into shelters. Though Hamas credited Iran for supply, Israeli and Western intelligence insisted Khalid's modifications made the systems launch-ready. Each incident marked a step in his evolution, from crude pipe rockets to advanced, semi-guided projectiles. Each date, each impact, underscored a reality that haunted Israel's defense establishment. Rashid Khalid was no longer simply building weapons. He was redrawing the battlefield. By 2010, Rashid Khalid's name had ascended from the margins of intelligence files to the very top of international watch lists. For Israel, his innovations represented a direct assault on national security, threatening millions of civilians within rocket range. Shin Bet, Mossad, and Israeli military intelligence all designated him a Category A target, a classification reserved for figures whose elimination was considered essential for state survival. Reports indicated his blueprints were no longer confined to Gaza. Fragments of his designs had begun to surface among Hezbollah engineers in Lebanon and smuggling networks in Sudan. This expansion marked him not simply as a Hamas operative, but as a regional proliferator of technology. The United States soon followed Israel's lead, adding Khalid to Treasury Department sanctions lists for providing material support to terrorism. His bank accounts were frozen, his name flagged across international travel systems, and any foreign company caught trading in his supply chain faced penalties. The European Union quietly issued similar restrictions, though officials avoided public acknowledgement, wary of complicating relations with Arab states. Interpol circulated a red notice for his capture, though such symbolic warrants carried little weight in Gaza's fractured landscape. Yet together, these designations sealed his status. Rashid Khalid was now a man pursued across borders, an outlaw whose every movement was monitored. Within Hamas, the shift in his status elevated him further. His image, though never widely publicized, circulated in grainy photos among militants as proof of defiance. Young recruits spoke of him in reverent tones, calling him the man who could make rockets fly like birds over the barrier. In propaganda videos, Hamas boasted of technological breakthroughs without naming him directly, but his fingerprints were unmistakable. The irony was sharp. The more Israel publicized his danger, the more his myth grew within Gaza. For Khalid himself, the designations transformed daily life into a labyrinth of paranoia. Every phone call was suspect, every shadow potentially a surveillance drone. He moved under aliases, carried forged documents, and relied on an inner circle of loyal couriers to shield him. Yet he understood the mathematics of his situation. Every step up the most wanted lists narrowed his options, bringing him closer to the moment when evasion would no longer suffice. His genius had guaranteed him a place in history, but it had also placed a target squarely on his back. The first serious attempt on Rashid Khalid's life came in 2011, when an Israeli drone targeted a convoy believed to be carrying him near Khan Yunis. A missile struck the lead vehicle, reducing it to twisted metal, but Khalid had switched cars minutes before. Witnesses recalled a deafening explosion, a fireball rising into the night sky, and the chilling realization that the intended passenger had once again eluded death. For Mossad and Shin Bet, it was confirmation that killing Khalid would not be straightforward. His paranoia, constant movement, and reliance on deception made him a phantom. In 2013, Israeli intelligence tried a subtler approach. Reports later suggested that an operative posing as a merchant attempted to pass Khalid a laptop pre-rigged with surveillance software and a delayed chemical dispersal device. The handoff never occurred, thwarted by one of Khalid's meticulous security checks. Yet the plot revealed a willingness to use poisons, electronics, and precision tradecraft to eliminate him without open confrontation. Each failure added pressure within Israeli circles, where officials feared Khalid's next innovation could surpass the Iron Dome's interception capabilities. Another attempt unfolded in late 2015, when a bomb concealed inside a shipment of spare parts was detonated remotely after delivery to a Rafah workshop. The blast destroyed the building, killing 2 apprentices, but Khalid had left the site only hours before. Survivors described him as shaken but resolute, interpreting the attack as further proof that he lived under constant pursuit. These near misses became woven into his legend, reinforcing the perception that he was a man shielded by destiny, always one step ahead of Mossad's reach. By 2017, rumors circulated that multiple European services had been quietly asked to monitor Khalid's movements abroad. One unconfirmed account claimed that French intelligence disrupted an Israeli plan to poison him in Marseille, fearing diplomatic fallout if an assassination occurred on European soil. Whether fact or disinformation, such stories highlighted the tension between global powers. Allies supported Israel's desire to neutralize him, yet they balked at operations that risked scandal on their own territories. Still, the relentless pursuit never ceased. Each attempt brought Mossad closer. Each escape narrowed Khalid's margin of survival. The pattern was clear. His death was not a matter of if, but when. By the late 2010s, the sense of inevitability surrounding Rashid Khalid's fate had become inescapable. Every intelligence report, every intercepted message, every whisper from informants painted the same picture. His life was a countdown. He lived in constant transit, shuffling between safe houses in Gaza, clandestine workshops in Sudan, and discreet hotel rooms in Europe. Each trip offered opportunity, but also risk, for Mossad's reach had no borders. To his followers, his survival seemed miraculous. To his enemies, it seemed temporary. Khalid himself understood the calculus. He told close aides that every engineer has an endpoint, acknowledging that assassination was the occupational hazard of his craft. Yet he continued working, driven by a belief that his legacy would outlive him in every rocket that pierced the sky. The atmosphere around him thickened with dread, as though death were an unseen passenger shadowing his steps. Friends whispered that he smiled less, traveled lighter, and kept his goodbyes brief. The man once seen as untouchable was now haunted by the awareness that inevitability had finally caught up with him. For Mossad, the question was no longer how to find him. It was only a matter of choosing the perfect moment to strike. The conflict that shaped Rashid Khalid's life was rooted in decades of unresolved grievances between Israelis and Palestinians. By the time of his birth in the 1970s, Gaza had already become a crucible of resistance and repression, marked by refugee camps, economic deprivation, and waves of uprisings. The First Intifada of 1987 had introduced the world to stone-throwing youths and neighborhood barricades, while the Second Intifada of 2000 escalated into a bloody confrontation with suicide bombings, targeted killings, and the militarization of daily life. Khalid's trajectory unfolded within this history, where each generation inherited both trauma and determination. His technical genius emerged precisely when Hamas was seeking to transform from a street-based insurgency into a more sophisticated fighting force capable of challenging Israel's overwhelming conventional power. The broader regional landscape only amplified the stakes. After Israel's 2005 withdrawal from Gaza, Hamas consolidated control in 2007, leading to a blockade by Israel and Egypt that choked the enclave's economy. Smuggling tunnels became lifelines, and engineers like Khalid thrived in finding creative ways to outmaneuver restrictions. Each rocket launch became not only an act of defiance, but also a symbolic rejection of isolation. Meanwhile, Israel's military campaigns, Operation Cast Lead in 2008, Pillar of Defense in 2012, and Protective Edge in 2014, brought devastation to Gaza, but failed to eliminate Hamas's rocket infrastructure. These wars provided both the crucible and the justification for Khalid's work, reinforcing his belief that survival depended on technological parity, however crude. Beyond Gaza, the geopolitics of the Middle East provided a stage upon which Khalid's importance was magnified. Iran and Syria funneled support, eager to use Palestinian resistance as leverage against Israel. Hezbollah in Lebanon served as both ally and model, demonstrating how rockets could alter strategic balances without conventional armies. Conversely, Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia viewed Hamas with suspicion, wary of its ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and its disruptive potential in regional politics. Thus, Khalid's rockets were not merely weapons, they were bargaining chips in a far larger game of alliances and rivalries. The broader conflict was therefore not just a local struggle, but a web of wars, sectarian divides, and shifting alliances. Rashid Khalid's story could not be separated from the siege mentality of Gaza, the retaliatory logic of Israel, and the opportunism of regional powers. Each missile he designed was both a personal act of resistance and a geopolitical message, echoing far beyond the skies in which it flew. His life and work embodied the entanglement of individual genius with the grinding machinery of history. The death of Rashid Khalid cannot be understood without examining how different countries positioned themselves within the conflict that defined his life. Israel, above all, saw him as a mortal threat. Every advancement he engineered forced its defense establishment to spend billions on missile interception systems like Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow. In Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, Khalid's name circulated in closed-door briefings as a singular danger, a man whose genius could stretch Hamas's reach to strategic assets, airports, and power plants. For Israel, eliminating him was not vengeance but survival, a matter framed as preemptive defense. Iran, on the other hand, viewed Khalid as an extension of its own regional strategy. Though Hamas's relationship with Tehran fluctuated over ideology and politics, Iranian Revolutionary Guard officials quietly valued his ability to adapt their technical aid into operational systems under siege conditions. His workshops in Gaza became living laboratories where Iranian designs were tested and refined against one of the world's most advanced militaries. For Iran, supporting Khalid was not only about helping Hamas, it was about showcasing defiance against Israel and proving that even under blockade, resistance could innovate. Europe occupied a more ambivalent position. Officially, the European Union condemned Hamas's rocket attacks and blacklisted the organization as a terrorist entity. Yet European governments were cautious about endorsing targeted killings, particularly when they risked spilling onto European soil. Khalid's rumored presence in countries like France, Germany, and the United Kingdom placed European intelligence services in uncomfortable positions. They monitored his movements but hesitated to become executioners. The scandal following Mossad's 2010 assassination of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh in Dubai, where operatives used forged European passports, made governments wary of another diplomatic uproar. The United States stood firmly alongside Israel, reinforcing sanctions on Khalid and offering intelligence support when possible. Washington portrayed him as part of a global terrorist network, his rockets a symbol of Iranian influence in Gaza, yet American officials also recognized the fragile balance. Every Israeli strike risked destabilizing already volatile alliances with Arab states. Meanwhile, countries like Qatar and Turkey maintained indirect channels with Hamas, offering political and humanitarian support while avoiding explicit acknowledgement of figures like Khalid. The spectrum of positions, from Israel's determination to eliminate him, to Iran's eagerness to protect his work, to Europe's cautious discomfort, underscored Khalid's significance. He was not just a man in a workshop. He was a node in a global web, his survival or death resonating across capitals, boardrooms, and battlefields alike. Rashid Khalid mattered because he embodied the convergence of intellect and insurgency in a way few figures ever did. Unlike commanders who thrived on charisma or financiers who controlled resources, his power derived from a singular, irreplaceable skill set. He transformed Gaza's crude arsenals into instruments capable of altering Israel's daily reality, forcing millions of civilians into shelters with every siren. Each missile he helped design carried not only explosive potential, but also psychological weight, projecting Hamas's reach beyond Gaza's borders. For Israel, this shift represented more than tactical danger. It symbolized the erosion of technological superiority that had long guaranteed security. Khalid's significance also stemmed from his ability to replicate himself through teaching. He was not a lone genius hoarding secrets, but a mentor, cultivating protégés. His underground workshops became training centers where apprentices learned metallurgy, propulsion, and electronic timing. Even when Israeli strikes destroyed facilities, his methods survived in the minds of dozens he had trained. This diffusion of knowledge made him exponentially more dangerous. Killing him would not erase his legacy, but allowing him to live meant continual advancements in Hamas's arsenal. In this sense, he represented both a target and a multiplier effect, magnifying the threat through every student he inspired. On a geopolitical level, Khalid served as a bridge between Hamas and its foreign patrons. His technical adaptations gave credibility to Iran's claims of empowering resistance, while his presence in Europe for conferences and clandestine meetings demonstrated the porousness of borders in the age of global militancy. To Western intelligence, he became a case study of how a single engineer could destabilize balances of power. His work blurred the line between local insurgency and international security threat, making his existence a matter of discussion in NATO briefings as much as in Gaza's streets. Ultimately, Rashid Khalid mattered because he symbolized the future of asymmetric warfare. In him, the battlefield shifted from sheer manpower to brainpower, from rifles to circuitry, from rhetoric to rocket schematics. He was not only a Hamas operative, but also a prototype for the kind of militant whose value lies in innovation. His assassination was pursued not merely to remove a man, but to disrupt an idea, that under blockade, under siege, in the most desperate of circumstances, resistance could still innovate and strike fear into a far more powerful enemy. That is why Mossad hunted him relentlessly, and why his name will linger in the annals of shadow wars. They began arriving quietly, days before the ship left Southampton. Mossad operatives slipped into England on staggered flights from Tel Aviv, Paris, and Rome, traveling under carefully forged passports bearing the identities of tourists, businessmen, and aid workers. Each alias had been tested against border security databases to avoid triggering suspicion. One agent, posing as a French wine merchant, checked into a modest hotel near the port, while another masqueraded as a British academic attending a maritime conference. Their luggage carried nothing unusual: neatly folded clothes, guidebooks, toiletries. Hidden within false compartments, however, were the tools of their mission: fiber optic cameras, lockpicking kits, and microdoses of fast-acting toxins. At Southampton's docks, the operatives blended seamlessly with the stream of holidaymakers boarding the cruise. Families posed for photos, couples admired the ship's grandeur, and in their midst, Mossad's phantom team disappeared into the crowd. Each operative had been assigned a role, one to shadow Khalid's movements, another to handle logistics, and a third to maintain secure communication with Tel Aviv. Their briefing emphasized patience. This was not a mission of gunfire or explosions, but of precision, silence, and deniability. A death in international waters had to look natural, a tragedy, not an assassination. As the vessel prepared to sail toward Germany, Khalid himself boarded under a discreet reservation, accompanied by 2 aides. He believed the cruise offered anonymity, a floating refuge where he could hold quiet meetings with intermediaries away from Gaza's constant surveillance. Yet even before he stepped into his cabin, his hunters were already in place, tracking him through the mundane rituals of boarding: passport checks, luggage tags, and the exchange of polite greetings with staff. The operation had begun, not with violence, but with footsteps on polished decks and the silent merging of operatives into the background of leisure. The operatives established themselves aboard the cruise ship with meticulous precision, checking into cabins on separate decks to avoid suspicion. Each room was strategically chosen to provide vantage points over corridors, stairwells, and elevators leading to Rashid Khalid's suite. Their covers were flawless: a middle-aged couple celebrating an anniversary, a solo traveler carrying novels in French, a businessman making calls about fictitious shipments. Every smile at a waiter, every casual stroll across the promenade was a layer of camouflage concealing the surveillance net they had cast. Tiny fiber-optic cameras concealed in innocuous objects such as air fresheners and luggage tags were discreetly installed in hallways outside Khalid's cabin. These devices transmitted encrypted feeds back to laptops hidden inside the operatives' cabins, creating a constant watch over his comings and goings. One agent positioned herself as a regular at the ship's piano bar, sipping mineral water while noting every detail of Khalid's evening movements. Another befriended housekeeping staff, offering generous tips in order to learn which hours cleaning crews typically accessed his corridor. Surveillance was not only technological, but human, weaving together fragments of information until a full pattern of Khalid's behavior emerged. Khalid, for all his paranoia, felt disarmed by the ship's environment. He kept to his suite for long stretches, occasionally emerging for quiet meals in the dining hall or brief walks on the observation deck. To him, the ship's isolation seemed protective, cut off from the chaos of Gaza or the scrutiny of European streets. Yet every step he took was logged, every interaction observed. His reliance on routine, coffee at dawn, a phone call after dinner, became the very detail that betrayed him. The surveillance net tightened invisibly, preparing the stage for a strike that would look like fate, not murder. The morning of September 14, 2013, began without incident. Passengers awoke to the hum of engines as the cruise ship cut steadily toward Germany. On the upper decks, families gathered for breakfast, while couples strolled leisurely along the railings. Inside his cabin, Rashid Khalid followed his usual ritual: a pot of bitter coffee, phone calls routed through encrypted applications, and a brief review of his handwritten notes. To outside eyes, it was a morning like any other. But for the Mossad team, it was the culmination of months of preparation. By midday, the operatives had already signaled the green light to Tel Aviv. Surveillance confirmed that Khalid's aides had left the suite separately, one heading toward the ship's gym, the other to a scheduled meeting in the dining hall. For the first time in days, Khalid was alone. The agent, posing as a French academic, positioned himself in a corridor 2 doors away, book in hand, appearing engrossed in a novel while quietly monitoring foot traffic. Another operative prepared a disguise change in her cabin, shifting from a casual tourist outfit to the crisp uniform of a ship attendant, complete with forged ID. In the late afternoon, while passengers attended a cooking demonstration in the ballroom, the team moved into final alignment. Hallway cameras confirmed minimal staff presence, and a timed diversion, engineered through a false maintenance request, redirected housekeeping crews away from Khalid's floor. The operative in disguise wheeled a service cart toward his door, appearing as nothing more than another employee performing routine duties. Hidden within the cart's compartments lay the tools of entry: a magnetic key override, latex gloves, and a vial of fast-acting paralytic. Evening fell, and the ship's lights glittered across the dark waters of the North Sea. Khalid, exhausted from travel and lulled by the sense of seclusion, settled into his cabin after dinner. At precisely 20:47, the final go order was issued. Within minutes, the operative approached his suite, sliding the override device across the lock. The door clicked open with no alarm, no disruption. The room remained still, the sound of engines masking the faint intrusion. Passengers above laughed over wine and music, unaware that below them, history's silent hand was about to close around one man's fate. The team deployed compact surveillance kits, encrypted radios, and battery-powered fiber-optic cameras concealed inside luggage and air vents to maintain constant visual contact without arousing suspicion among passengers or crew on board the cruise liner that night silently. For entry, they favored magnetic override tools, slim gym variants, and custom-molded keys produced from Covert blueprints copied from ship schematics acquired months earlier under a false maintenance contract negotiated by an operative in Southampton using forged diplomatic identities. Chemical agents were minimized to reduce forensic traces. Instead, operatives carried microdoses of paralytic compounds stored in glass ampules designed to disperse rapidly when aerosolized within a sealed cabin, delivered via modified humidifier units disguised as amenity items on board. Electronic intrusion played a dual role. Passive interceptors logged crew communications, while active RFID spoofers and GPS jammers created moments of confusion, allowing operatives to move undetected during scheduled service windows and maintenance simulations coordinated precisely with shore handlers instructed. Forensic countermeasures included immediate removal of contaminated linens, controlled disposal of used ampules in shipboard incinerators, and substitution of personal effects to create a credible narrative of natural death while erasing chemical signatures and planting benign medication traces to mislead. Tradecraft extended beyond hardware. Agents rehearsed contingencies, memorized cover stories, and employed linguistic camouflage, speaking accented German or clipped French to blend with crew and passengers when questioned by curious staff or port authorities during inspections and routine security checks. All communications were funneled through burn phones and one-time satellite links with coded check-ins every 30 minutes. Handlers in Tel Aviv analyzed feeds in real time, providing abort orders if anomalies threatened exposure of the cell or lives. The operation married high-tech precision with human judgment. When tools failed, improvisation prevailed, and it was human discipline, not gadgetry, that decided the final outcome of the night and ensured deniability in the days that followed across multiple borders. The moments before Rashid Khalid's death unfolded like a razor's-edge thriller. In the corridor, the operative disguised as a crew attendant froze as two genuine stewards unexpectedly appeared, pushing carts in her direction. Heartbeats raced, but with practiced calm she nodded politely, murmured a greeting in German, and slipped past without hesitation. In another cabin, the French tourist monitored camera feeds, holding his breath as a curious passenger lingered near Khalid's door, pausing to tie a shoe. Seconds stretched into eternity before the man moved on, leaving the hallway clear. Every sound, the hum of engines, the creak of metal, the laughter of revelers upstairs, felt amplified, threatening to betray them. Media caught only fragments. Occasional leaks described an Egypt-based Hamas smuggler. But no photo accompanied articles, no interview surfaced. The paradox strengthened his myth. Famous enough to be hunted, obscure enough to remain faceless. In intelligence corridors, his profile grew heavier. He was no longer seen as courier, but strategist, kingpin, facilitator of regional instability. His name moved up lists, closer to lines where policy transformed into assassination. Thus, by the time he checked into Cairo's Ramses Hilton in February 2009, Ahmed Khaki was no longer a shadow. He was a marked figure, already sentenced invisibly by states that operate in silence, planning only how and when. The first credible attempt on Ahmed Khaki's life came in October 2006. Driving near Rafah, his convoy was ambushed by gunfire from unknown assailants. Officially attributed to tribal disputes, whispers insisted it was a joint Israeli-Egyptian sting. Ahmed escaped unscathed, reinforcing his legend. In December 2007, a car bomb detonated outside a Cairo apartment he occasionally used as safe house. The blast killed 2 couriers but missed him by hours. Egyptian police blamed criminal rivalries. Intelligence files, however, quietly marked Mossad involvement with coded certainty. By mid-2008, Israeli drones tracked his movements relentlessly. One strike near Al-Arish obliterated 3 vehicles in a fiery desert plume. Yet Ahmed had switched cars minutes earlier, using decoys. Survivors later joked he carried invisible maps predicting missiles in advance. Another attempt surfaced in Damascus. In July 2008, he fell violently ill after a discreet dinner with suspected Iranian intermediaries. Hospital tests suggested poisoning. He recovered slowly, convinced the food had been laced. Whether Mossad or rivals orchestrated it remains unresolved. Egypt also tried indirect pressure. Arrests targeted his lieutenants, designed to isolate him. In September 2008, one deputy died under interrogation, sparking rumors Ahmed was next. Still, he evaded capture, weaving through Cairo streets like a ghost cloaked in taxis. Some attempts bordered on cinematic. Israeli commandos allegedly staged a mock traffic accident outside Ismailia, intending to trap his vehicle. Reports claimed Ahmed spotted the ruse instantly, rerouting through alleys. Official records never confirmed it, but intelligence chatter preserved the tale. Each failure heightened urgency. Mossad's leadership grew impatient. Tel Aviv demanded results, framing Khaki's survival as national embarrassment. Analysts warned every missed chance allowed him to move another shipment, each rocket extending shadows of war across southern Israel. For Hamas, the pressure was visible. Some leaders feared association with him invited collective punishment. Yet others glorified his survival, branding him invincible. Songs circulated in Gaza, verses praising his escapes as proof divine providence shielded their cause. American analysts noted with interest. Failed assassination attempts revealed intelligence gaps, miscalculations in timing, reliance on faulty informants. Washington briefings concluded, Eliminating Kahaki would require precision, deception, and patience, exceeding routine counter-terror operations. Thus, by late 2008, assassination attempts were no longer isolated incidents. They formed a campaign, each failure sharpening resolve. The hunt for Ahmed Khaki became not just mission, it became obsession, where inevitability loomed heavier with every breath he took. By early 2009, Ahmed Khaki's life resembled a ticking clock. Each hotel check-in, each border crossing, carried the scent of finality. His enemies circled tighter, while his allies whispered doubts, sensing proximity to an end none could prevent. Surveillance thickened invisibly. Phone lines clicked faintly, shadows lingered outside cafes, foreign faces checked into hotels he frequented. He pretended indifference, but comrades noticed. His laughter diminished, his movements slowed. He behaved like a man already rehearsing for martyrdom. Even Hamas commanders grew uneasy. Meetings ended with tense silences, as if his presence carried contagion. They admired his discipline, yet worried his visibility endangered them all. Behind closed doors, some even suggested retiring him quietly, sparing networks broader collapse. For Mossad, the calculus shifted from opportunity to inevitability. The question was no longer if, but when. Precision timing mattered. His death must be clean, deniable, surgical. Plans accumulated like blueprints, each rehearsal narrowing the margin for error. Thus, Ahmed Khaki walked Cairo's boulevards like a ghost in waiting. He carried pigeons in memory, maps in notebooks, and death in his shadow. Inevitability hung over him like smoke, promising that the hunter's patience would soon reach conclusion. The hunters arrived in Cairo like ghosts in tailored suits. February 2009, flights trickled in from European hubs, Zurich, Vienna, Rome. Each operative carried passports with names borrowed from strangers, faces altered by subtle surgeries, identities woven from bureaucratic smoke. They landed at different hours, never as a group. One appeared as French businessman attending trade fairs, another as Canadian tourist sketching pyramids, a third as South African consultant with folders of fake contracts. Their cover stories rehearsed like theater. At customs, they moved with calculated normalcy. Bags contained ordinary clothes, toiletries, perhaps a guidebook. Hidden within, however, were specialized tools, lockpicks disguised as pens, micro cameras embedded in chargers, coded communications tucked into paperback novels. Hotels across Cairo welcomed them unknowingly. Operatives checked into mid-tier establishments near Zamalek, Garden City, and downtown. They scattered deliberately, ensuring no two passports linked by location. Yet all were within short drive to Ramses Hilton, their true stage. Each carried a fragment of the operation, never full picture. Compartmentalization was doctrine. One controlled surveillance, another handled entry, a third specialized in pharmacology. Only a few held knowledge of final act, an invisible choreography written by Mossad handlers abroad. Meetings occurred in cafes, embassies, or crowded markets. A glance at newspaper headlines, a folded napkin, a misplaced coin, all subtle signals of synchronization. Cairo bustled unaware, never realizing the city was theater for an imported script of assassination. Meanwhile, Mossad headquarters monitored from afar. Secure channels relayed satellite imagery, intercepted phone chatter, Egyptian police schedules. Every detail mattered. Traffic flows, hotel staffing, weather reports. Precision required omniscience, and omniscience required layers of watchers above the watchers. Thus, by mid-February, Cairo hosted strangers with ordinary faces and extraordinary purposes. They walked among tourists and traders, but their true task was singular: to erase Ahmed Khaki without leaving behind a footprint heavier than cigarette ash. The Ramses Hilton towered above Cairo's Nile Corniche, a magnet for businessmen, diplomats, and tourists. Into this revolving door stepped Mossad operatives under aliases. Each check-in was innocuous. A signature in the ledger, a polite nod, luggage carried without suspicion. One operative claimed to be an energy consultant. Another posed as Italian photographer, camera bag filled less with lenses than surveillance gear. A third, a woman, signed in as Canadian academic attending a regional seminar. Their covers layered seamlessly. They requested rooms on different floors, strategically aligned for vantage points. Windows overlooked lobbies, corridors, and entrances. From these perches, micro-cameras captured comings and goings, transmitting data through encrypted bursts disguised as ordinary hotel Wi-Fi traffic. Kaaki's own arrival was noted on February 15, 2009. He checked in alone, carrying worn briefcase. Operatives recorded his room number, 814, within minutes. Surveillance tightened instantly. His door discreetly watched, his phone tapped, his movements logged like numbers in ledgers. These hidden actors ensure continuity, transforming espionage into an industry. In this phantom bureaucracy, decisions are rationalized, sanitized, and disguised as mere procedures, even when they culminate in death staged as sleep. Within the phantom bureaucracy move the invisible legions, operatives trained to embody myth and anonymity in equal measure. Each belongs to a unit whose reputation has become legend whispered in corridors of power. Kedan, Mossad's elite assassination squad, is spoken of as a cadre of chameleons, masters of disguise, experts in poisons, fluent in languages and customs of lands they may never call home. They are ghosts clothed in tourist attire, waiters' uniforms, or business suits, blending seamlessly into any environment. Alongside them operate the technical wizards of LAP, Lohama Cycloget, masters of surveillance, forgery, and deception. Their craft is not the trigger but the false passport, the doctored file, the micro-camera hidden in a corridor lamp. Each role is archetypal: the seducer, the forger, the watcher, the cleaner. These legions never ask why. They embody function, executing missions whose moral calculus has long been stripped away. Their profiles read less like human biographies than mythic archetypes etched into the clandestine imagination. Warrior shadows who vanish before dawn, leaving behind no footprints save for the silence of those erased. The killing of Rashid Khalid was not an isolated act, but part of a long continuum, echoes of missions past that shaped Mossad's legend. In 1960, Adolf Eichmann was snatched from a Buenos Aires street, bundled into a car, and flown to Israel in a daring abduction that stunned the world. 2 decades later, in 1973, Operation Spring of Youth sent commandos storming into Beirut, assassinating senior Palestinian figures in their own homes, while leaving neighbors terrified of shadows that melted into the night. There was Lillehammer in 1973, a botched pursuit of Black September operatives, where Mossad agents mistakenly killed a Moroccan waiter. The scandal left a scar, but also hardened the agency's determination to refine its methods. In Dubai 2010, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh was found dead in his hotel room, a scene eerily similar to Khalid's demise. Immaculate, clinical, with assassins who vanished before discovery, leaving only forged passports as faint fingerprints of the state behind them. Each mission was cinematic in scope, chilling in execution, and left deliberately unresolved in the public imagination. Together, they formed a lineage of clandestine operations where the line between justice and vengeance blurred into obscurity. Khalid's death was simply the latest verse in an unfinished ballad of shadows. At the summit of this clandestine pyramid sit men and women whose names seldom reach the public. Leaders who sign orders behind closed doors with pens that carry the weight of death. They are not gods in truth, but flawed strategists cloaked in authority, puppeteers pulling strings from polished offices in Tel Aviv. For them, Khalid's death was not personal but procedural, a calculated strike in an endless chess match, yet their power feels divine, distant, absolute, unquestioned. In their hands, entire lives become expendable pieces, sacrificed to maintain an illusion of security in a world governed by shadows. When Rashid Khalid's body was finally returned to Gaza under heavy security, his funeral became both a spectacle of grief and a declaration of defiance. Tens of thousands crowded the streets of Khan Yunis, carrying his coffin draped in green Hamas flags and adorned with portraits that cast him as a martyr engineer. The air throbbed with chants of vengeance, punctuated by the thunder of gunfire fired into the sky in ceremonial salute. Women wailed from balconies, while masked militants vowed to continue his work, proclaiming that Khalid's death would not silence the rockets, but multiply them. Hamas leaders seized the moment, elevating his image from secretive engineer to public symbol. Speeches praised him as the architect of resistance, a man who had fused intellect with faith to challenge Israel's might. His coffin was paraded through the camp where he had been born. The very alleys that had shaped his childhood now transformed into corridors of mourning. Across Israel, sirens sounded as security forces braced for retaliatory fire. For Gaza, his burial was not just the end of a life but the ignition of a new cycle of anger, a rallying cry that ensured his death resonated far beyond the grave. In the months following Rashid Khalid's assassination, the power vacuum he left behind reshaped Gaza's militant landscape. Apprentices he had trained stepped into his role, attempting to replicate his designs with varying degrees of success. Some rockets misfired, others achieved limited range, but the continuity of his methods proved resilient. Israel celebrated his removal as a tactical victory, yet soon realized the knowledge he had dispersed ensured his influence endured. In many ways, killing Khalid disrupted, but did not dismantle Hamas's missile program. It only delayed its evolution. Politically, his death hardened divisions. Hamas capitalized on his martyrdom, presenting him as proof that resistance carried both cost and honor. Iran, while quietly acknowledging the setback, increased its technical support, smuggling components and advisors into Gaza to fill the void. European governments, embarrassed by Mossad's audacity on their soil, tightened intelligence cooperation but remained wary of public scandals. The operation's success also emboldened Israel, reinforcing a doctrine of targeted killings as a cornerstone of national defense. For Gaza's youth, Khalid's name became mythic, a symbol of how intellect could defy overwhelming odds. Long after his burial, his ghost lingered in classrooms, workshops, and tunnels, ensuring that the war of innovation he began would not end with him. In the end, Rashid Khalid's death changed little in the grand scheme of geopolitics. The rockets still flew, the sieges continued, and the cycle of retaliation endured. Yet his assassination revealed something deeper: the invisible struggle where governments sanction killers, where science is weaponized, and where truth is buried beneath layers of secrecy. Khalid's life proved that intellect can become as dangerous as any army, and his death showed how far nations will go to silence such minds. In the shadow world of espionage, justice and vengeance are indistinguishable, and every victory leaves only unanswered questions.